Introducing health and wellness advocate, veteran international real estate investment expert, author and speaker, Adiel Gorel.
Health tips, fitness tips, nutrition and well-being, world-class experts, all right here on my podcast, The Adiel Gorel Show. Obviously, there is a scale where we can measure the color of our skin. And the color of our skin has to do with where our mothers were born and, all of that stuff, the haplotype. And if you are number one on that scale, I don't remember the name of that scale. If you're number one, the whitest of the white, obviously you really have to be careful with your exposure. But I argue, even if your skin is number one on the scale, the lightest possible, you really want to watch out for the sun. Won't you benefit from staying in daylight, noon sunlight, which has UVB and UVA, for a minute, 2 minutes? You build a tolerance, you build, as Jack Cruz likes to say, a solar callus, so to speak. And he would argue also that when you are out in the sunrise, when UV is not present yet, and you expose your skin to the near infrared and the red, it actually gives it a little bit of a defense against the UVB that comes later on. What do you think about all of that?
That is true. So when you get up and you're out there, let's just talk about the infrared light and then the ultraviolet light. So in the morning time, as the sun is coming up, the infrared light is starting to come up almost like it's a semicircle on the graph. And so when you hit noon, it's at the maximum. And then as it's going down, of course, like a semicircle. So infrared light, think of it like a semicircle. Whereas at noontime, 10 o'clock, 11, 12, 1, 2, you're seeing more of a parabola going up and then coming down in terms of ultraviolet light. So yes, the best time of day for the most amount of infrared is at noontime, but the best ratio of infrared to ultraviolet light is going to be early in the morning and later in the afternoon. What does that mean? I agree 100%. If you are getting outside, let's say you're going outside the whole day, it's kind of prepackaged into the deal. You're in the morning, and what's happening is you're getting plenty of infrared, not a lot of ultraviolet. That's going to be causing your body to produce more melatonin, more antioxidants. It's going to be strengthening, getting ready for the day. And then as that ultraviolet comes into your body, you've got that antioxidant system in place. You can deal with mutations or things that occur as a result of that ultraviolet, but you do need the ultraviolet, right? So you do need to make vitamin D. And your body has been, even just for that day, getting ready for that type of onslaught, which is not much of an onslaught if you're ready for it. And then if there are any damage things that occur, if there's any covalent bonds that have been broken in addition to the cholesterol derivatives that make vitamin D, if there's bonds that are broken in the DNA, those can be fixed. Antioxidants are going to be coming once again as the sun starts to go down. Ultraviolet light is going to back off. You're going to get more infrared light, and you're just going to be mopping up the damage that has occurred that day. And then the sun goes down, and then you're ready for the next day on the other side. So absolutely, I think that is important for people that have very light skin, don't go outside, and may hear this episode. Their only chance of getting outside may be at noon. And I think if they were to go out there, I would hate for them to get a sunburn and then say, you know what, this whole thing doesn't work for me. I'm not going to do any of it at all. For those people that they know that they sunburn easily, and sunburn, things of that nature, is a product of what's going on in the environment, the sun, and also what's in their body that may be causing them to sunburn. So there's a lot, it's complicated, right? So what we need to do is understand that people react differently. It may be not just due to the sun, but also to their genetics. It may be also due to their epigenetics. So things that they have done, not even them, but maybe their parents, that have caused them to have these epigenetic factors that go on to the third and fourth generation that cause this sort of thing to happen. But it's possible that if they start getting out into the sun more, and their kids start to do that in a safe way, that those epigenetic things can actually be reversed. Some of the maybe we don't know this yet, but it's very possible that we have data that diet may influence whether or not somebody's getting a sunburn. So it's very complicated. There's a lot of factors that go into this. And I think what we need to do is just be cognizant of an individual who may burn more than the other, because we don't want people burning, obviously. We want them to enjoy the sun. And for those people, covering up at first may be something that they may need to do.
You described it in a way that is beautiful and complete. Because if we go back just a couple of 100 years ago, daily life for most people, it used to be you woke up, you get out, you spend your day pretty much, outside. So you go through the entire cycle that you described, the infrared in the morning prepping you. And by the way, whether you are dressed or not is immaterial because, the infrared goes in, prepping you. And then the UV comes in, but you're already kind of prepped. When you talk about the antioxidant, you probably meant mostly melatonin that we make inside our mitochondria as a result of, the infrared. So as you go outside all day long, as we used to, and then you go, finally, you're in the sunset, you get a lot of red and infrared, and also you get the signals like, this thing is going to end, and pretty soon it's going to be dark. We'll talk about that in a second, because that's super important, of course. But you described it beautifully. We were made to be outside. Now, of course, today, different time. But there's one element which is very simple. Just like we said, the simplest thing is to open your door and step outside. That's very simple, and it's free, as you said. Another thing that's extremely simple is nature provides us with a very potent sunscreen. And that sunscreen is called shade. Shade! Come on! People are saying, no, I can't go out. I can't, the sun. Go into shade. We talked about the trees reflecting, the near infra. Sit under a tree. Be like Newton. Start something in physics, You might
discover a law. You might discover a law or two.
You might discover a law of physics. But shade. What is wrong? You tell me what is better, to be locked inside in front of a laptop in the daytime or to be, outside completely in the shade. Shade.
Imagine you're sitting under a tree and you're not in direct light, and within your visual field, you can see greenery all around you that is in the sun, and it's specially filtering out most of the ultraviolet light, if not all of it, and reflecting back at you predominantly green light, but also a very high amount of infrared light. And you're not going to get that inside. The only place you're going to be able to get that type of infrared light is outside. And let's face it, when you go outside, your chances of moving and exercising go up dramatically than if you're inside, number one. And number two, the air quality that you're breathing, generally speaking, outside, unless there's a forest fire or something like that, is going to be a higher quality than you would be inside. So already there's at least 3 benefits to just simply walking out of your door and going into the outside.
And by the way, shade doesn't have to be provided necessarily by being near a tree. Just even a hat casts shades on your face. People say, oh, I talked to a friend of mine about, all of this, and she said, you don't understand. I'm a woman. I can't have any sun on my face. Wear a hat. Yes. Look at women from the 16 big hats, right? That's shade.
I often cite for this the Southern Sweden study, which I'm sure you know. This was the study that was done in Sweden looking at 3 types of women. These are fair-skinned women living in Sweden, and there was about 30,000, I believe, and they followed them for 20 years. Those that were avidly going into the sun, those that did not go into the sun as much, and those that avoided the sun. And the mortality differences between these 3 groups were stark. So stark, in fact, that they found that the mortality after 20 years in these women, those that sought out the sun and smoked had the same mortality as those that avoided the sun and did not smoke.
Wow, that is powerful. That's a very strong finding.
Yeah, and by the way, just this last year, that another paper was published, this one by the dermatologist Richard Weller, who I'm sure you know, out of University of Edinburgh, who used a UK biobank study and showed basically with 10 times the number of people, both men and women, he found exactly the same thing. There was a reduction in non-skin cancer mortality. there was a slight increase in skin cancer, but no increase in deaths in terms of melanoma, I should say. So this led him to actually write a paper that was published in the Investigative Journal of Dermatology, where he literally went down and listed all of the benefits of daylighting. And he also showed that there's been some, even in Australia, where they have a real problem with skin cancer. The Australian societies for dermatology are now rewriting their guidelines to say, look, it's not a matter of avoiding the sun like it's a deadly laser. Okay, it's actually there is some benefit, and we need to take note of that, and we need to balance our recommendations, realizing that we could be saving a lot of skin cancer, but sending these patients to an early death.
So, in the wintertime, even in high latitudes on the northern side and very low latitudes on the southern side, you'll still get your infrared, even though you're dressed for the cold, depending on how you're dressed. And you have an episode on we'll talk about what you do. You do some very useful stuff, but you talk about the type of clothing and how they block infrared. But even in the winter, if you are dressed warmly, if you go outside, you'll still get that infrared light.
Yes, and that's another aspect to this article that Glenn Jeffrey just published in Nature Scientific Reports, is that what he showed was that even though the sunlight, the path of the sunlight or the path of the infrared light was on one part of the body, they were still able to see the beneficial effects in the mitochondria in other parts of the body that were not in the path of the light. So this would answer the question that if you go outside and you're exposing your face or your hands to the sunlight, there is still a benefit to be gained. We're now just finding out in terms of biology that mitochondria communicate with themselves, even in different organs of the body.
Well, it's like the Glenn Jeffries experiment with the glucose. It was only on the shoulder. And it had a full system type of an effect.
Right. And just to sort of nail that aspect home, I live in Southern California, but I live about a mile up. And so we get snow and it gets cold. Sometimes it gets below freezing. And I remember this last year, I was looking at it. It had snowed recently and there was about 6 inches of snow on the roof. And the sun was just going down and it was on this part of the roof and I could see the snow melting. It was dripping. I could see that it was actively melting. And I looked at it and I said, yes, that's the infrared light. Even when the sun is this low, right before it sets, like how low can it be? That's as low as the sun could be. Right before it sets, the infrared light is cutting through the atmosphere obliquely. It's hitting the snow on my roof and it's melting it.
As soon as the infrared light is heat.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as the sun went down and stopped illuminating the snow on the roof, the temperature did not change, but the melting stopped immediately. As soon as the sun went down, it stopped. And that's a demonstration to anybody who is concerned about how do I get enough infrared light? I live at this very high altitude. I live, it's winter, it's cold. Rest assured that the sun of even the winter, so long as you can see the sun, so long as you're being illuminated by the sun, that infrared light is able to penetrate and do what it needs to do to affect those changes in your body.
By the way, I don't know if I heard it right. I want to see what you think about it. I believe your buddy, Bob Fosbury, said that even though we like to think that at a certain latitude, we don't get UVB, UVA in certain months. We don't get it at all. We can't make vitamin D in the winter. He said, no, that is not true because of scatter.
Right.
It scatters and you get it from the cloud level, but you're dressed up. And of course, the very short wavelength don't penetrate deep into your body. They stop, at a millimeter or two. So if you're dressed warmly, so basically he said, I think it was him, I'm not sure. He said,
you're right. Yeah, we've talked about this.
If you go out naked in the wind, not naked, but lightly dressed or maybe with your shirt off, you'll actually be able to make vitamin D.
Yeah, Bob and I have talked about this before. I love to see some data on it. It makes sense to me what he's saying. From a physics standpoint, we know that the sky is blue because of Rayleigh scattering, and that's a scattering of short wavelengths, and of course UVB is a short wavelength. So it makes sense that the sun should be able to produce light in the ultraviolet B segments that should be able to be scattered in the atmosphere, and that the blue sky of the winter should be giving us the right kind of infrared light to produce vitamin D. On the other hand, there's this unquestionable fact that people in the wintertime don't make as much vitamin D. I think it's a definitely a good explanation, one that could be tested to see if it's because of the amount of clothes that we're wearing, but it's certainly a possibility.
Okay, we talked, I think, a fair amount about very useful stuff, at least in my opinion, about the benefits of certain frequencies of light. Unfortunately, this is not 200 years ago or 300 years ago.
Right.
100 and something years ago, electricity came on. So until then, I mean, I don't know when fire came on. That could have been a long time ago. But even fire has a very fair amount of infrared. Obviously, it's hot as hell, fire. And then we had candles and all of that. But then we got electricity.
Yep.
But nowadays, it's an exponential shift with us being locked inside. We have a small device the size of a booklet that absolutely we look at all day long. And the base light that powers it is a blue pump. Now, we know the benefit of blue. In the daytime, the blue sky is telling us to be up, cortisol is up, you're out and operational and you're running, and this is what you need to be. Here, we just saw the sunset. We just saw the last vestiges of this beautiful red sunset, and now it's going to be dark soon. We go inside. Well, what do? I mean, I would postulate that under light of what we talked about so far, in an ideal world, ideally, we should just go to sleep in a completely darkened room. Well, that ain't going to happen because the sunset is at these days here where I am, Northern California, it's about 8:30. We're not going to go to bed at 8:30. Okay, so now we have light in the house. Not only that, we are behind glass. Yes. Anyway, glass is really relevant in the daytime. We'll talk about that in a second. But we are in the house now, and we are dying to look at our phone and see what's going on in this country and that country and what's the new news and everything. We look at our phone without any shield, and we should probably have some shield. And what we get is blue light. I mean, our phone shows us red and yellow, and we think, no, it's blue. So the blue light is telling us it's noontime. Now it could be midnight, and still So I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that will destroy the melatonin that we need for better sleep.
Yes. So let me put into data. There was a study that was done that looked at how fast somebody fell asleep and basically what the sleep latency was. So sleep latency is the time it takes for you to fall asleep. And the two arms of the study was somebody looking at a Kindle, which is basically a backlit electronic device where you could read, in one arm. And in the other arm was a regular paper book that was illuminated by a soft incandescent light, okay? It was not even a contest. The person who was reading on a Kindle went to bed, I think it was 20 minutes versus 12 minutes. I'd have to look back at the data. And there was much more light on the spectrum when they measured the spectrum of light that was coming out. So much more light. You can actually reduce the amount of light and control that with a soft incandescent bulb versus a backlit LED type of light.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think it would be safe to say that we would be better off if we have to look at the Kindle, if we have to look at our phone, if we have to look at the laptop. I'm looking at the laptop right now and I'm talking to you. It's the daytime, but I'm looking at the laptop.
Right.
We would be better off wearing blue blocking glasses. Wouldn't that be true?
That would be better than not wearing blue blocker glasses, but not better than not looking at the light at all. Correct.
Okay, so that's about the blue. However, the intensity of light is important as well. So bright lights, even if it's incandescent and it has near infrared and all the stuff that our body needs, if it's bright, not so good at night. Is that so?
That is correct, and that's why when I go to a hotel or even in my own home, I'm constantly looking around at night trying to find sources of light pollution. These these radios and these devices and these LED displays on air conditioners or on televisions, they could be very bright and kind of disrupt the room. I mean, it's nice that you can kind of see around the room when the lights are off, but it's not good for your body to have that much light going around.
So the Department, of Energy, you and I both live in the United States. So the Department of, Energy decided something, and I can't say I fault their logic. They said, look at an, incandescent lamp.
Yeah.
It gives you a whole lot of spectrum, but also if you touch it after a little while, you'll get burned. Why? Because it gives off infrared light, which is heat. Wait a second. We are logical people. Of course, that's the problem with not being interdisciplinary. They
Correct.
just looked at one. They
Correct.
said, okay, the logic says the infrared light is not even visible. If it doesn't help us see and it wastes all, this, energy, hey, let's just chop it off. So now it's been mandated. It may be changed, but we don't know yet. Mandated that we cannot buy, starting, I think, 2028, I think it is, we can't buy an incandescent lamp. In San Francisco, you don't get a building permit if you don't use only LEDs. Now,
Correct.
those LEDs will not have the infrared light because it's just wasteful. Now, the fact that our body needs it like it needs food was not discussed because they were not interdisciplinary. What do you think of all of that?
I agree 100%. Look, when I moved into my house, which was an old construction, it was built in 1988 and therefore had sockets everywhere. The first thing I did when I moved into the house back in 2009, after that bill in Congress was signed in 2007, which formulated that, though they didn't actually put it through the rules yet. I changed all the bulbs to LED bulbs, and the amount of energy use went down significantly. So I found the right kind of bulb. It was a 2700K. It looked very similar to the incandescent bulb that I had in there. It was kind of a warm light, which I liked. I was very happy with it, and I went along great. There were some bulbs that I didn't really quite like. They were a little bit higher number, K, like 3000K, and I didn't really like the way that they looked, but I thought I had done well on that, and they're still here. I still have those bulbs, and they still work. Then I started to read about this and I started to understand, and I started to look at these bulbs, and I realized this issue with the bulbs, this issue with the new rule that is going to go into effect is really completely eliminating any kind of infrared light that we might have inside the house. Now, realize we just said that the best thing to do is to get outside. And so some people might say, well, if really the solution is to get outside, then what do we care about what type of lights that we have in our homes? Well, to that, I would, once again, someone that's sort of been looking at this question, Glenn Jeffrey, actually has a preprint out, and he is wanting to get this published shortly. It's actually in submission, where he's taken these people that live in an LED environment, okay, and he has changed those bulbs out to incandescent, and he's retested them looking at their ability to perceive color. Now, why would he have that as an endpoint? The reason why he would have that as an endpoint is that color perception in the retina is a cone-derived function, which requires a lot of energy that it gets from the mitochondria that surrounds and are in that cell. Just so you're aware, the retina is the tissue in the body with the highest concentration of mitochondria in that tissue. And so this is a great way of looking at whether or not there is a benefit from switching from LED to incandescent and testing it this way. And sure enough, in 22 subjects, there was a 25% reduction in the inability to distinguish between different types of colors in that test, where he checked for 3 different types of color blindness that we see in the red type of cones, in the green perceiving cones, and in the blue perceiving cones. And that paper is actually available. You can read that paper and see the data. If that is what LED lights are doing to our visual perception, then what is happening to the rest of our body that's not getting the infrared light that it would normally be getting inside, given the fact that we spend now in the United States, 93% of our lives inside a vehicle or inside of a home.
Well, I mean, I understand, and you probably know much more than me, that Scott Zimmerman actually has a company.
Yeah.
I believe it's called Nira Light.
Yes.
For near infra, and he is actually striving, and I think he's succeeded in making a light that's an LED light that complies with the Department of Energy's guidelines, and yet he managed to sneak in a tungsten wire that generates infrared without exceeding the limit. Is that true?
Yes. So let's go back to the rule. The rule was in 2007, it was signed by George W. Bush, that there would be an energy standard for all what they call general service lamps. These are the types of bulbs that you put in your ceiling, generally speaking. There's a few exceptions to this, like what you might see in a decorative lamp or in a fan or something like that. Certainly the types of bulbs in your microwave, but general service lamps, there was no standard. And then in 2007, there was a bill that was passed by Congress, signed by George W. Bush, that said, okay, it's now going to be 45 lumens per watt. So a lumen is a measurement of light that unfortunately is biased in the yellow-green range of the spectrum. So if you really want to maximize the number of lumens that are coming out of a bulb, given the amount of energy that you're putting into that bulb, which is measured as a watt, you're going to concentrate a lot of that energy into the middle portion of that spectrum to get your best ratio. So incandescent bulbs are anywhere from 10 to 15 lumens per watt. So when the government essentially went to 45 lumens per watt, it essentially took incandescent bulbs out of the picture, because there's no way you could get that type of efficiency. So the type of bulbs that we see now that you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever home improvement place that you want to go to, they all have the efficiency of 45 lumens per watt. Scott Zimmerman's bulb, no different. He's able to produce enough light that's visible that gets him to that 45 lumen per watt threshold and still give out a little bit of infrared light. Now that's great. The problem is that last year, the Department of Energy came up with a new rule where they are pushing to try to make these LEDs even more energy efficient than they were back in 2007. And so without legislation, just with making a new rule in the Department of Energy, they raised that efficiency. Now remember, incandescent bulb is 10 to 15 lumens per watt. These new LEDs are around 45 lumens per watt. They're now going to raise that up to about 125 lumens per watt. This is going to, in my opinion, I've talked to Scott Zimmerman and a number of other people that have looked at this. It's really going to kind of blow up the cottage industry of making LED bulbs which satisfy the current rule but have a little bit of infrared light in them. It's going to be very difficult to get infrared light in these types of bulbs with this new rule that's actually supposed to be going into effect in the middle portion of 2028.
And the effect on human health.
Oh yeah, this is the Department of Energy that came up with this. How they came up with this is they looked at the amount of energy savings and the amount of greenhouse gases that would be eliminated by making all of this that energy efficient. And the amount of, because of that, they were able to then calculate how much fuel would not be expended, and therefore particulate matter in the air, and therefore the cost savings in terms of health from asthma and from other respiratory diseases. Nowhere in their calculus did they consider anything about infrared light and mitochondria and chronic diseases. Nowhere. So it's not even in the calculus. This was not from Health and Human Services, right? This is Department of Energy, and they don't talk to each other.
That's the problem. They are not interdisciplinary. Yeah. So what can people do who just moved into a brand new home? It wouldn't even get certified if it didn't have pure LED lights. And we know that there was an experiment that you described that already showed the light, how you distinguish lights has been degraded, and you were just speculating what it does to the rest of the body.
Yeah.
Probably not very good. So as the years go by, people always talk about, oh, we have more diabetes, we have more chronic, disease. This is part of it. Now, I don't fault the Department of Energy for wanting to save, energy. That's perfectly fine. But I'll make one argument. I talked to a friend of mine about, the LED lights at home. And my friend said, but it saves energy. And of course, we know that it's at the expense of health. So, why don't we, I was trained as an engineer. When you want to make a point as an engineer, you take it to the extreme to make it very clear. So here, let me give you a way that will save even more, energy. It will save an enormous amount of energy. Here is what you can do. Kill everyone on the planet. Oh, that will save so much energy.
Yeah.
But, it's not so good, killing and all of that. So, you take it to the extreme.
Right.
Now you say, oh, we want you to use only a certain type of light that will make chronic disease higher, that will make you less healthy, but it will save, energy. It's just on the same spectrum of logic.
Yeah, no, I understand. So for people who are concerned about this and are moving into a new home, the issue is not the wavelengths from these lights. It's the lack of the other wavelengths that should be in there. So one way of looking at, there's a couple of ways of skinning this cat, if you will, and realize that when you move into a new house and they have new fixtures, new light fixtures, these are not LED bulbs that you screw in similar to an incandescent bulb. These are designed specifically to make sure that you cannot replace these LED fixtures with incandescent fixtures, okay? So that's the first point, is that you really cannot switch them back. You can't go retroactive unless, you have a construction person who is willing to go up there and actually flip out these fixtures and put in the ones that you can screw in. So the way I would go about doing this is, first of all, making sure that you're getting outside, because that's really where you're going to get the most amount of beneficial light. That's number one. Secondary is trying to fix the type of light that you're getting in your home. And the way to do that would be to add light to your home that is on at the same time as these lights are on in the LED and then in the visible spectrum. So getting a regular lamp that you can screw in and put an incandescent bulb into there, or getting an IR bulb, infrared bulb. These are sorts of things that you would have on at the same time, hopefully bathing the room with infrared light, just like Glenn Jeffrey did in his randomized controlled trial, to improve at least the vision that we're aware of, but maybe there's other endpoints as well. Now, there's something else that is coming around the corner, and I need to probably do a video on this on our channel. It's something that's really quite amazing, and there's a company called Phosphortech. Phosphortech it does something that's really interesting. So let's get into the physics of this a little bit. Remember that these photons that are coming out of these LED bulbs that are standardized in our homes now are higher in energy than the infrared photons that we would like to see coming out as well. So that's a key understanding, is that the photons that are coming out are all high energy and they're not across the spectrum, and that the type of photons that we would like to see in the infrared spectrum.
And by the way, I'll stop you right here so people, can understand why.
Yeah.
The longer the wavelength, the lower the energy.
Correct.
So if you are going to the wavelength just of the visible light, these are shorter wavelengths, hence the higher, energy. That's what you mean when you say that.
So what this company Phosphortech is doing is they're actually manufacturing, and the best way I can describe it's kind of almost like a gelatinous disc. It's squishy, and you can kind of move it around. But what you can do is you can actually take these LED bulbs, pop off at least the A19 ones, which are the standard, pop this off, put this in there, and there's actually a phosphorescence that occurs. It's a chemical, it's a light chemical reaction that occurs, that when these high energy photons in the visible spectrum go into this material, what comes out the other side is a lower energy infrared photon.
Fascinating.
So the brightness of the bulb might decrease a little bit, but now you're using that energy back to get that infrared light back. So you can essentially turn any LED bulb into at least the product that you would normally see of an incandescent bulb, if that makes sense.
Fascinating. By the way, even incandescent includes, an amount of blue that you don't really want so much at night. So you still, okay. I mean, things we can do to protect ourselves. We talked about blue blocking glasses, not having the intensity of light at night be too high, go a little bit lower, put an extra maybe red and infrared lights at home. By the way, you can take it one step further. You can turn off the LED lights and only leave on the extra lamps that you bought.
Exactly.
Red and infrared. A lot of people are doing it. I've had people on this show, you talk to them and their whole background is red.
Fascinating.
Okay, so now I want to jump into something else, back into the daytime for a second. Some people say, oh my God, I have so much sunlight. I'm so good. My house has giant windows and I'm looking at the lake. I'm so good. I'm sitting inside all day. Well, we know the glass has been treated to not allow certain wavelengths, including near infrared, because it's heat. We don't want to heat our home. We want to save, energy. So once again, in a way, when you sit and you look outside at the beautiful view through your window, you're getting an alien spectrum, so to speak, that your body doesn't even recognize. Is that not true?
That is true. So those are designed, it's called low E glass. And you can tell if that's what it is, either by looking at the printing on the glass pane, but also if the sun is coming through that window, you should feel the warmth of that sun. If you don't feel the warmth of that sun, which is how we interact with infrared light, then you know that that glass is specifically cutting out infrared light. And the reason why they developed this is that it's not going to heat up the inside of your house. You're not going to have to put the air conditioner on as much.
Yeah, makes sense.
You'll see this, yeah.
Look, I don't fault the Department of Energy in the domain that they're focused on. Their logic is very sound. It's just, I wish everybody would talk to each other about our health as well. Some people say that at the level of the mitochondria, they only see the byproducts of what we eat. They don't see fat or protein. They see electrons and protons. Yeah. So, in a way, we also get that from the visible light, from the spectrum of light. So some people would say we actually eat the sunlight, part of our food, because our food that we actually eat in our mouth, by the time it reaches the mitochondria, they just see, and by the way, they talked about walking with your bare feet on the beach. Now the earth has a negative charge. We have a more positive charge, so we get electrons from the earth. So one could say we eat food, we eat light, and we eat the ground. I know it sounds crazy, but at the level of the mitochondria, it doesn't sound as crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Scientific reductionism in this country has told us and given us a lot of assumptions that are now turning out to be incorrect. And I think that this is one of them, and there are probably many, many more to be discovered. So scientific reductionism is saying that if something is good, then there must be that something as a whole isn't what's doing it. There must be an active ingredient somewhere in it that we have to isolate, purify, and give it high doses to get a better response. And that's not always the case.
And preferably put a patent on it. So
yeah, exactly.
All right. So now I want to go. I know I could talk to you for 19 hours and I'll still have questions, but I know we have limited time. So I want to jump to something else. Some interventions that we all are talking about these days are cold exposure, sauna, fasting. If you can talk about those things, maybe even, deuterium, depleted water. I know it's many points, but we can start maybe, with cold exposure and what you think about it.
So in looking at that, I have become very interested with, and probably because of my experience in the intensive care unit with COVID, is looking at this molecule called interferon, which is a major tool of the innate portion of our immune system. Our immune system is divided into the adaptive, which has more to do with antibodies, And the innate has more to do with discovering things in our body and invaders that shouldn't be there, and using interferon to prevent their replication and to, basically attack viruses. So one of the things that has really interested me is learning how to improve our own interferon naturally. There's a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was a randomized controlled trial looking at interferon in patients with COVID-19, showed a 50% drop in hospitalizations, in symptoms and mortality, and really good study. And so we know that interferon is important. There's been a long list of studies that have looked at the effective response that people have with COVID and what their interferon response was. So when you look at the data, you see that interferon can be almost increased tenfold by simply increasing body temperature. So I've looked at that as a potential way. And then looking back historically, how people have used that, for instance, in the Spanish flu, about how to increase the temperature, things by using things such as hydrotherapy, and a new paper that's just come out recently showing that a lot of the regulatory enzymes that manage interferon production start to jump up at very high levels once you hit about 38 degrees Celsius, which is about 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is right where we call a fever. So generating a artificial fever can actually be very beneficial in doing that for long periods of time. There was just a study that came out showing that that's in fact the case with hot baths. Now, the flip side of that is cooling people down, and that has another effect in that it can cause demargination. That means the white blood cells that are on the inside of our blood vessels become detached. They go into the circulation. They do the thing that they're supposed to do, and it can raise circulation levels of interferon and things of this nature. So I think it's a tool that probably needs more research. I would love to actually do a randomized controlled trial with hydrotherapy in an actual setting. But we have a lot of historical data. We have some randomized controlled trial data exogenously with interferon. And we have a number of studies here that showing that that we can actually get those type of levels if we were to expose the patients to an artificial fever.
So you're saying the sauna acts as an artificial fever.
Yes.
But the cold exposure lets those white blood cells that are stuck detach. So now we have more of them.
Yes, not only that, but so you spent about 20 to 30 minutes heating up the body temperature. And then when you come out of that, you're peripherally vasodilated. So you're letting off a lot of that heat. That's a normal response. But what you can do is you can cause vasoconstriction of those peripheral blood vessels so that they don't give off a lot of the heat. The heat stays in the core where it's needed. And you can cause that vasoconstriction by a short burst of cold water, not only to cause demargination, but also to cause vasoconstriction. And actually, ironically, cold water at the end of a long period of heat can keep your core body temperature elevated for longer.
I see, because it will constrict, the heat will stay inside.
Correct.
So in Finland, there's a millennia of going in the sauna and cold, and cold. And I did hear that you should finish with cold. This is one reason why.
Yeah.
So, I mean, don't they have studies already?
Yeah, so in Finland, they actually, if they were to tell everybody in Finland at one moment to go inside of a sauna, there would be enough room in the saunas in Finland to hold everybody in the entire population. And sauna is extremely popular there. It's obviously part of its culture. And when they do studies in Finland on this, their control group, since there's nobody that doesn't do sauna, their control group is people who do it once a week. So that's just fascinating. And so the data coming out of there is incredible. There's a dose response curve. The more times per week people do this, the better the effects, lowering cardiovascular mortality, and so forth. It's incredible.
Well, I mean, do you want to talk about deuterium, or we should leave it to some?
I'm not that much of an expert on deuterium. I know it's water that has hydrogens that have an extra neutron in the nucleus, but I'm not that up on it. I work full time doing critical care medicine, so in the areas that I just try to keep up on is just a few areas. So I'm not up on that area.
Well, Roger, I want to thank you for your incredible generosity with your time. I know you're super busy, but I learned a lot. I hope our viewers and listeners did too. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me today. Click the subscribe button for more video. Got a question or comment? I love questions and comments. Leave yours below. And here's another video you've got to see.